The glass was halfway to my lips when I heard my name echo off the chandelier. To Elena, our quiet genius, enjoy that $20,000 bonus. Aaron's voice sliced through the crowd like a steak knife through a paper plate. I froze. The stem of my champagne flute hovered midair as my pulse thudded against my collarbone. The CFO laughed a little too hard. Lydia, the general counsel, paused her sip and raised an eyebrow. The room turned just enough for me to feel like the floor had tilted 5 degrees. I forced a small smile, locked eyes with Aaron, and said, loud enough for every C-suite ego in the room to hear, I never received it. You could hear the air conditioning hum after that. Aaron chuckled like I'd told a cute joke, raising his glass higher. Always so humble, he said, waving it off with the same hand he'd used last quarter to shut down employee bonuses, pending restructuring. Only this time his eyes didn't match his grin. His smile said spotlight, but his pupils said problem. Hey, real quick, if you're into stories where silence slices deeper than shouting, hit that subscribe button and like the video. Seriously, 97% of people listen without subscribing, and it really helps us keep these stories coming. Okay, back to the party. I took the sip anyway. Bubbly tasted like static in my throat. The room moved on, but I didn't. My mind was a Rolodex spinning in a lightning storm. No deposit, no direct payment, no e-DocuSign, and definitely no email. I checked. Twice. I'd written half the company's contract language myself. I knew exactly how bonuses were handled, how they were routed, when they were announced, and which executive had to countersign before they were paid out. And more importantly, how my specific contract had been restructured after the Brandon Keller incident 3 years ago. Clause 712. It was dry, legal, buried in jargon. But in the right situation, it could burn the building down. Aaron didn't know that, but Lydia might have. And judging by the way she lingered a little too long by the mimosa station before finally walking out, she'd probably just realized what he'd stepped in. I stayed at the party just long enough to avoid suspicion, long enough to watch Aaron double-kiss the investor's wife and brag about his transformative leadership, long enough to overhear two VPs joke that I was probably going to spend that 20 grand on more books and thermal mugs. Let them laugh. Let them toast. That single sentence, that careless little lie, it would be the fuse. Back at my desk Monday morning, I opened my folder labeled Whistles, the kind of folder that HR pretended not to know about, the one with screenshots, audit logs, metadata trails. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even personal. It was documentation. Because what Aaron didn't know, what none of them ever bothered to ask, was that Clause 712 wasn't just a footnote. It was a trigger, and he just pulled it in front of the entire boardroom with a champagne glass in his hand. Monday morning hit like a hangover I didn't drink for. The office smelled like leftover catering and corporate shame. A half-deflated Q3 Champions balloon hung limp over the main corridor like it had seen too much. I walked in quietly, same as always, coffee in hand, black blazer, no eye contact. And just like that, like none of it had happened, everyone acted like that toast didn't exist. No congrats, no smirks, no winks from finance, just the same Monday shuffle of over-caffeinated middle managers praying for a quiet inbox. Not that I expected balloons at my desk, but the silence, it was surgical. I powered on my laptop, entered my passphrase, and opened the compensation portal. No deposit, no bonus, no sign of anything that even looked like $20,000. Not pending, not processed, not reversed, just blank space where the money should have been if it were real. So I went deeper. HR's internal portal listed a document under FY24 performance adjustments. The file name was labeled with my name. I opened it. There it was. Performance bonus issued, $20,000. Signed, Elena Grayson. Only, I hadn't signed it. I stared at the signature block. My name was there, but the hash didn't match my token. The metadata tagged the approval from a VPN in Toronto. Odd, considering I'd been working from Cincinnati the entire month and hadn't left the state. I checked the MAC address. It belonged to H. Ward, the CFO's executive assistant. Holly Ward. Of course. She was the queen of urgent signature chases, the same one who once asked me to backdate a compliance memo just to smooth things over for optics. I'd told her no then too, but I guess this time she didn't bother asking. I opened the audit trail archive, pulled the signature log, saved the file with a timestamp, and uploaded it to the folder I'd quietly labeled Clause 712 Prep 3 years ago, just in case. Just in case they ever got this bold. Because Clause 712 wasn't fluff. It wasn't a CYA line or a vanity clause. It was a legal tripwire buried under dense, dusty policy language. One line with devastating consequences if pulled. Any attribution of financial compensation without documented execution shall trigger immediate third-party review as outlined in Section 11. Section 11, Independent Forensic Audit, initiated by me, irrevocable once triggered, bound by Sarbanes-Oxley. Required reporting to the board and lead investor within 24 hours of confirmed violation. I'd negotiated it after Brandon Keller tried to loop my name into a kickback scheme and got caught. Back then, they gave me hush equity and said, it'll never happen again. I smiled, took the equity, and rewrote my entire contract. Every page, every clause, every damn comma. They didn't even read it, they just signed. So when Aaron lifted his glass and made me the poster child of ethical compensation while feeding lies to shareholders, he opened the vault. I sat back in my chair. Across the office, Aaron was laughing with Lydia like nothing had happened. Finance buzzed. Marketing whined about brand consistency. The machine kept churning. I clicked open my encrypted email draft. Subject line, Clause 7.12 violation. Formal trigger notification. Attached, forged bonus document, signature audit log, internal memo chain, VPN logs. BCC, external audit liaison of Frampton and Dale LLP. I didn't send it yet, not yet, but I let it sit there. Ready. Because Aaron gave me more than humiliation that night. He gave me grounds. And in the world of compliance, grounds are everything. I didn't knock, I didn't warn, I didn't lace it with small talk. At 9:12 a.m., I forwarded the email. Subject line unchanged. Attachments untouched. One sentence in the body. Refer to Clause 712, page 14. I watched the read receipt ping 5 minutes later. Lydia Hallberg, General Counsel, 10 years in that chair, 2 of them spent babysitting Aaron's visionary rebranding initiatives, opened the email at 9:17. She didn't respond. Not at 9:20, not at 9:30, not even when I passed her office on the way to the printer and caught a flash of panic in her eyes as she clicked rapidly between screens. At 9:42, her door shut with a thud that made the HR assistant flinch. And at 9:45, my desk phone lit up with a call transfer. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because at 9:48, Lydia called Aaron directly. And she didn't call from her cell. She used the conference line, speaker on. I knew because the line echoed as it rang, and I'd routed my monitor feed through the compliance audio queue last year after they accidentally left me off a call about vendor security loopholes I'd found. Aaron picked up, breezy as ever. Lydia, don't tell me you're about to make me sit through another clause breakdown. I haven't even had my espresso. There was no humor in her voice. You named Elena publicly. You referenced a bonus, one that doesn't exist. A pause. Then, what? It's symbolic. I'll push it through later this week. No, Aaron. Lydia's tone went from clipped to lethal. You used her name in a financial statement context, in front of board representatives, while reporting quarterly performance. That's attribution. Without compensation. That's misrepresentation. Aaron scoffed. It's just a party. No one's filing with the SEC over a toast. Clause 712, Aaron. Another pause. Longer this time. What the hell is Clause 712? Lydia sighed. You could hear the rustling of paper, her flipping pages, the weight of her silence thickening. Then she read it aloud, every word, each one sharper than the last. In the event the employee's name is used in any internal or external communications, verbal or written, pertaining to financial disbursements or acknowledgments without executed payment or documented approval, a forensic audit shall be initiated within 48 hours, overseen by an independent third party as outlined in Section 11, in accordance with Sarbanes-Oxley disclosure standards. Aaron finally stopped breathing. You're telling me she baked in an automatic audit trigger? Yes, Lydia said flatly. And it's binding. It was added post-Keller settlement, and you just activated it in front of the lead investor and half the C-suite. His voice dropped. Can't we just retroactively issue the bonus? No, You can't unwind public misstatement with hush money. This isn't just an HR fumble, Aaron. This is material misrepresentation. It opens us to compliance review. It exposes every executive bonus tied to performance metrics. And it cannot be untriggered. Silence. Then Aaron muttered the dumbest thing he could have said. Why the hell would someone like her have a clause like that? I leaned back in my chair, eyes closed. Because someone like me knew the storm was always coming. I just didn't know which idiot would light the match first. Now we both knew, and the fuse was lit. They didn't come crashing into my office with alarms blaring. No, they were smarter than that, or at least thought they were. It started with a calendar invite. Subject line, clarification review, Q3 bonus documentation, sent by Lisa in HR. Polite, vague, the kind of request that pretends to be routine, even though everyone in the loop knew exactly what it meant. They booked a small conference room, the sad one with the flickering light and the dry erase board that still had teamwork equals $, half erased from someone's failed motivational sprint. I arrived 2 minutes early. Lisa was already there, along with 2 finance drones I'd seen but never spoken to. Not a single senior executive in sight, which told me exactly how scared they were. Lisa started with the usual fluff. Thanks for joining us, Elena. We're just walking through bonus approvals from last quarter and making sure all the I's are dotted, T's crossed. You know how it is. I nodded once. You want to know if I approve the $20,000 bonus attributed to me? All 3 of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of the finance guys coughed. Lisa smiled like I was a toddler who'd said a bad word. It's just a light review. I pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. Here's the full email thread from my inbox and outbox between August 1st and September 30th. No mention of a bonus, no approval request, no signed document. She reached for it, but I wasn't done. This, I said, placing a second sheet on top, is a screenshot of the compensation platform log. No access from my credentials on the date the bonus was allegedly signed. I flipped the page. This is the audit trail for document ID number Q3FIN2NEW38. It shows a digital signature under my name timestamped 11:22 p.m. on a Sunday night. Odd hour, one of the finance guys mumbled. Not for someone in Toronto, I said, turning to the next page. This is the VPN log for that timestamp. Accessed from an IP range registered to an office suite in Toronto used exclusively by H. Ward, the CFO's executive assistant. And this, I slid a final sheet across the table, is a comparison of my digital signature hash versus the one used on the document. They don't match. Lisa went pale. The finance guys were no longer making eye contact. You forged a financial record with my name in a Sarbanes-Oxley-covered organization. That's not just a mistake, that's criminal misrepresentation. To her credit, Lisa tried to regroup. We're still gathering facts. There could have been a clerical misrouting or permissions overlap. These things happen. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle. No, they don't. And that's when I reminded them, calmly, almost gently, that Clause 712 didn't just initiate a forensic audit. It also triggered a mandatory retention policy. Every email, every document, every Slack message, text, and internal memo relating to bonus disbursement was now under legal lock. That meant no deleting, no editing, no quietly cleaning up records. Their eyes widened like I just flipped the lights on during a robbery, because what they wanted, what they needed was for this to be a one-off. A rogue assistant, a silly error, something they could bury under jargon and forget. But now they were trapped. And worse, I had just made sure the trap stayed open, because I'd seen this kind of thing before, just never with my name attached. I'd flagged irregular bonus entries. I'd warned about vague approvals. I'd submitted 3 memos in the past 2 years outlining signature protocol abuse. They were all ignored. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a system, a deliberate one. And now, the system had coughed up the wrong name, mine. I stood, collected my folder, and said one final thing before walking out. I'm not the one who should be worried about documentation right now. You are. They called it a confidential consultation. I called it what it was, a containment strategy with muffins. The conference room was nicer this time. Leather chairs, real coffee, not a single flickering light. and the people inside didn't work for Halverson Analytics. They were from Frampton and Dale LLP, outside counsel, specialists in regulatory exposure and internal investigations. The kinds of lawyers who don't blink when words like SEC or criminal liability get tossed around. The lead counsel, a woman named Marissa Trent, gave me a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes and gestured to the seat across from her. "Ms. Grayson," she said, "thanks for joining us on short notice." I sat, folded my hands on the table, and waited. Marissa tapped the folder in front of her. "We've completed our initial review of Q3 bonus adjustments. Your clause, 7.12, grants you both standing and protection under Sarbanes-Oxley disclosure rules. And more importantly, it opens a pathway to forensic inquiry." She flipped the folder open and pulled out a single page. "This is why you were invited today." It was a payout table, executive bonuses across the C-suite. Highlighted in yellow were 3 VPs, revenue, operations, and brand strategy. All 3 showed a 12% increase in Q3 performance bonuses. And in the footnote, justification was listed. Departmental synergy validated by independent contract performance metrics, notably Elena Grayson, $20,000. They used me, they used my name, my phantom bonus, as a benchmark to justify their own hikes. Marissa continued, her voice steady. "Your forged bonus entry was key to the inflation model. The CFO and her office manipulated baseline payouts. Your approval gave them cover. In reality, they padded their numbers using you as an ethical fig leaf." I blinked slowly, not surprised. Just exhausted. "And let me guess," I said, "none of them had clauses like mine." She shook her head. "No, only you. Because 3 years ago, when Brandon Keller tried to spin my signature into a licensing payout for a product I didn't authorize, I knew the problem wasn't just him. It was the culture. Everyone else renegotiated their contracts to maximize stock options. I rewrote mine like a damn autopsy report. I buried my protections under layers of compliance language so dry it made HR's eyes glaze over. But it worked. Because I wasn't looking for fame. I was looking for a fuse. And now it had detonated. "We're not asking you to lead the investigation," Marissa said, "but we are asking for your cooperation. Your clause, your documentation makes you the most credible internal witness we have." I nodded slowly. "What happens to the CFO?" "She's already on administrative leave. Her assistant resigned this morning. We're moving to preserve digital communications across all departments effective immediately." I glanced at the folder again. The same names who used to roll their eyes when I brought up outdated retention schedules, now frozen under audit flags. "You realize," I said, "they laughed when I insisted on that clause." Marissa finally smiled. "No one's laughing now." I didn't want this war. I wasn't after power. All I ever wanted was for the numbers to be real, for the signatures to mean something, for the systems we built to actually work. But now that the house was on fire, I'd be damned if they blamed the smoke on me. By Wednesday morning, the executive floor was bleeding. First came the email. "Effective immediately, CFO Melanie Kincaid has been placed on administrative leave pending internal review. No subject line capital letters, no regret to inform, just cold corporate bloodletting." Then came the second one, 2 hours later. H. Ward no longer with the company. That one didn't even bother explaining. Holly had been scrubbed from the internal directory before her badge even hit the ground. I watched from the 3rd floor, sipping burned coffee from the lobby kiosk while Aaron paced the glass corridor above like a trapped wolf in a business casual cage. Word was he tried to convene a private clarification call with Frampton and Dale that morning. It lasted 11 minutes. He hung up, looking like he'd aged a decade. No one had read my contract. Not really. They'd skimmed it like a bedtime story, flipping past the long paragraphs, sighing at the legalese. They saw a quiet woman asking for precision and assumed I didn't know how the game worked. But I did. I just wrote the rules down while they were too busy congratulating themselves. The audit firm named in my clause, Donovan Lathrop, Forensic Compliance Specialists, was already embedded by Thursday. Per the clause, they didn't need board approval, just verified trigger evidence, which they now had in droves. Every payout from the last 8 quarters, every approved bonus, every time someone used my name like a golden stamp on a corrupt system. Aaron tried to walk it back, as if corporate fraud could be resolved with a clean press release and some light gaslighting. He called a town hall, mumbling about misunderstandings and internal oversights. The lead investor didn't attend. He called his own emergency meeting instead. Smaller, private, on-site. That's where everything truly turned. They asked me to join, not as a witness, as an authority. There were no cameras, no flashy intros, just a quiet room, 6 people, and a hard copy binder with my name on it. The investor, a man named Charles Beale, sharp-eyed and terrifying in his silence, sat across from me with the binder open to clause 712. "We reviewed the language," he said, tapping the page. "You structured this clause with foresight. You knew something like this would happen." "I didn't know who would trigger it," I replied calmly. "But yes." He nodded once, then turned to Aaron. "Who else used falsified benchmarks to inflate executive pay?" he asked. Aaron stammered. We're still identifying patterns. There are anomalies, but they are not necessarily fraud." "Wrong answer," Beale said flatly. "We don't guess. We audit. Elena, what's your recommendation?" Aaron's face went pale. It took him too long to realize it. He was no longer running the room. I was. And I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I didn't lean back like I'd won, because this wasn't a victory lap. This was cleanup. "Start with Q2 of last year," I said. "That's when the first discrepancies appeared, and you'll want to subpoena Slack archives. Most of their approvals didn't happen over email." Beale scribbled a note. Aaron just stared at me, stunned. I met his eyes once, long enough for him to understand what had always been true. My calm wasn't passive. It was calculated. He thought silence meant invisibility. Turns out it was insulation. And now the temperature had dropped below freezing. The folder was black, unbranded, no label, just a quiet hinge creaking as I opened it in front of the executive committee like it was any other status update. I didn't bring a laptop. I didn't need charts or slides. This wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning. 10 people sat around the glass table, pretending to be busy with papers they'd already memorized. Aaron was 2 seats to my left, stiff in his chair, sweating through his collar even though the ache was running cold. The CFO's seat remained empty. So did Holly's. Their names had been stripped from the pre-meeting packet. Just white space now. The outside auditor, Dana Lathrop from Donovan's forensic unit, sat across from me. Gray suit, tight expression, zero tolerance for bullshit. She gave a small nod as I placed the folder in front of her, then pushed it gently across the table. 5 years of bonus attribution irregularities, I said. Sorted by department, cross-referenced against performance reports, system access logs, and unauthorized signature discrepancies. Every flagged entry either went uninvestigated, was marked resolved without confirmation, or was closed by the same executive who approved the original disbursement. I paused. No one said a word. Dana flipped it open. Page 1, Q1, FY20. Executive adjustment entry, number 29. The bonus was approved due to synergistic vendor realignment for a VP who hadn't attended a single vendor meeting that quarter. Next page, Q2 FY20. Another bonus, tagged to increased regional ROI, justified using a PowerPoint from an intern who was never credited and who had since left the company. Page after page, I'd included the original justification, the manipulated benchmarks, and the missing or falsified documentation. Every entry had metadata. Everyone had been flagged by me in internal systems. Everyone had been ignored. I didn't narrate. I let the silence explain what the words didn't have to. When Dana reached the last page, she looked up slowly. "This," she said, tapping the folder with a short fingernail, "enough for criminal referral." No one exhaled. She turned to the investor rep from Beale Capital. "We'll begin immediate escalation. SEC gets the first copy, DOJ gets the second. I recommend executive-level counsel for everyone named more than twice in this file." Aaron looked like a man watching his own obituary get drafted in real time. He opened his mouth, but I beat him to it, gently. "I tried reporting all of this before," I said without malice. "I submitted documentation to HR, to finance. I sent alerts through our internal system. 3 times I escalated to the compliance committee. Each time I was told the issue was under review or that the matter was closed." The irony? I never asked for this seat at the table. I never wanted it. They ignored every flag I raised. Not because I was wrong, but because they believed I was small. A detail. A woman with folders and footnotes and quiet eyes who didn't understand how high-growth environments work. But I did. I just documented everything while they were too busy building glass towers with forged receipts. Dana closed the folder. "We'll take it from here," she said firmly. The meeting ended with no goodbyes, no handshakes, just slow, stunned silence as executives quietly exited one by one, eyes down, unsure which of them had just been sentenced by proxy. Aaron lingered near the door, jaw tight. I didn't speak to him, didn't even look his way. I just stood up, collected the now empty folder, and walked out. Power wasn't something I grabbed. It was something they handed me, one ignored flag at a time. The board didn't call it a vote. They never do when it's about saving face. They called it emergency action to protect fiduciary integrity. The kind of language that sounds like a wet napkin but hits like a firing squad. At 8:03 a.m., a statement hit inboxes company-wide. Effective immediately, Aaron Whitmore is suspended from executive duties pending full external review. No speech, no final bow, just his name, stripped bare of title, tucked between legalese and a line about commitment to transparency. By 9 a.m., Lydia Halberg's resignation followed. For personal reasons, of course. The kind of resignation that doesn't come with cake or a Zoom farewell. She slipped out quietly, probably before the auditor could schedule her exit interview. I read both announcements over oatmeal in the break room, alone. When I walked into the 9th floor conference room for the next compliance restructuring session, the air was different. Stale. Uncertain. The vultures hadn't shown up for blood. They showed up to count the corpses and try to guess how many were left standing. Beale Capital's rep, Charles, was already seated. No coffee this time. No pretense of charm. "Ms. Grayson," he said, motioning to the seat beside him. "Thank you for being here." Like I had a choice. He tapped the contract packet in front of him. "We're initiating a full compliance rebuild. For the time being, the board is recommending you act as internal liaison between legal, audit, and HR until the third-party review is complete." I didn't nod. I didn't smile. I simply said, "Understood." This wasn't ambition. This wasn't a title. This was triage. Charles looked me dead in the eye. "I'm not asking you to play nice. I'm asking you to keep this place from burning down. Can you do that?" "Yes," I replied, "but you won't like how it gets done." Around the table were people who had snickered when I'd pointed out contract errors, who had rolled their eyes when I'd requested extra validation steps. One VP once told me my obsession with signatures made me feel important. Another said I slowed things down when I flagged irregular approval paths. Now they were waiting for my instruction. Now I was the one deciding who stayed on what access list. I laid out the plan without emotion. Staff interviews, immediate hold on all performance disbursements, revocation of legacy access for any suspended or exited execs, real-time audit logs routed through legal, not ops, and above all, no documents move without countersigned verification, I said. Not anymore. No one protested, not a single eye roll. Silence had a new shape now, and it looked a lot like compliance. When the meeting ended, I stayed behind to collect the packets. One of the junior legal analysts paused on her way out. "I didn't know you'd been watching all of this that long." "I wasn't watching," I said. "I was documenting." The difference was everything. By noon, I was seated in Aaron's former office. The nameplate was gone. The desktop background still showed a yacht he didn't own. I didn't touch anything. I didn't unpack. I didn't even adjust the chair. This wasn't my throne. It was my crime scene. And I was here to preserve every fingerprint they thought no one would ever find. The chair was too expensive. Italian leather, hand-stitched. The kind of thing Aaron would casually mention in meetings like it proved strategy. I didn't sit in it. I pulled it aside and stood at the desk instead. Flat shoes planted, spine straight, eyes scanning the contract laid out in front of me like a surgeon prepping for post-op review. It was mine. My original employment agreement, printed on real paper, opened to page 14. Clause 712 was underlined in red. Notated, stamped by the notary I'd insisted on using instead of default HR onboarding. The margin notes were still there, my handwriting, small, even, permanent. A clause no one had bothered to read, until it detonated. The room was quiet except for the hum of the building's backup HVAC. Across from me, Dana, the forensic auditor, tapped the page gently with one perfectly polished nail. "This clause," she said, voice low but certain, "saved the company." I said nothing. She closed the contract slowly, carefully, like it was something sacred. Outside the glass wall, the office was a ghost town. The CFO's wing was sealed. 3 executive offices had been cleared, whiteboards scrubbed. A new temp nameplate was already mounted on the VP of Ops door, someone fresh from Beale's internal counsel. This place had been built on noise. Loud meetings, louder egos, thunderous applause for wins bought with fabricated metrics. And now the loudest thing left was me. Quiet, documented, unmoving. The board gave me limited authority: compliance lead, special advisor, liaison to audit council. No one dared offer CEO. They knew I wouldn't take it. I wasn't here to inherit the machine. I was here to rewire it so the next woman with a folder and a spine didn't need to weaponize silence to be heard. I drafted the new clause on a legal pad that afternoon. 1 line. All employment contracts shall include a mandatory clause read confirmation, signed, time-stamped, and notarized by the employee and 1 legal officer prior to final execution. The VP of Legal raised an eyebrow when I submitted it. I raised nothing in return. At 6:14 p.m., I signed the document myself. The same pen, the same precision. Across the office, the lights dimmed on an auto timer. No party, no speech, no champagne flute raised in my direction. Just the blinking cursor in our compliance portal confirming upload status. Complete. And that was the thing they never understood. I didn't want to run the company. I didn't want a title. All I ever wanted was accuracy. But silence writes the last paragraph.